The year is 48 CE. A 15-year-old girl steps across the threshold of the Palatine Palace. White silk clings to her slender frame. Myrtle leaves crown her golden hair, the symbol of purity and marriage. The Senate rises to its feet. The crowd roars approval. Emperor Claudius, 50 years old, his leg dragging, his speech faltering, takes a small hand in his. His name is already legend. Hayes will become something Rome will try desperately to erase. Valeria Messalina, remember it, because Rome tried to forget it. The blood from Caligula's assassination has barely dried in the corridors. For years of madness, executions as entertainment, incest elevated to policy, a reign so deranged that his own gods butchered him in a tunnel beneath this very palace. Rome is terrified. It needs stability, virtue, airs. They dress the girl as salvation. What they don't realize is that within 10 years, this palace will become something the ancient sources describe with trembling horror. Senators will become her prisoners. Noble daughters will disappear into her chambers and return altered, silent, bound by secrets they will carry to their graves. She will stage contests that would shock professional prostitutes. She will weaponize blackmail on a scale that would make modern intelligence agencies hesitate. She will marry another man while still Empress, in daylight, with witnesses, as if daring Rome itself to stop her. And when they finally do, her statues will be dragged through the streets and smashed. Her name chiseled from stone. Her memory sentenced to damnatio memoriae, the erasure of existence itself. And yet, 2,000 years later, you are still listening. Because the things Rome tried hardest to erase are the things that refuse to stay buried. Rewind to 38 CE. Rome looks invincible. The forum buzzies with merchants and senators. Children run between marble columns. But the rot is already there. Tiberius is dead, paranoid, despised, rotting alone on Capri. Then came Caligula. 4 years of terror, public executions, a horse-named senator, aristocrats forced to watch as he violated their wives at dinner. On January 24th, 41 CE, the Praetorian Guard struck. 29 stab wounds ended his reign. His wife was killed beside him. Their infant daughter's skull was smashed against a wall. Rome exhaled, then panicked. They found Claudius hiding behind a curtain. The stammering uncle, the family embarrassment. 50 years old, never wanted power, never prepared for it. But he was alive, and Rome needed someone in purple before the city tore itself apart. The god proclaimed him emperor, not because he was strong, but because he was there. Claudius knew the truth. He was a placeholder. He needed legitimacy, fast, an heir, a dynasty, proof the gods had not abandoned Rome. So he married Messalina, his third cousin, 15 years old, a bloodline tracing back to Aeneas himself. A beauty poets would build careers describing pale skin, golden hair, features so perfect they look carved from marble. She had been groomed for this role, taught modesty, obedience, chastity, a living symbol of virtue meant to stabilize an empire. On paper, she was flawless. The Senate approved. The people celebrated. Rome believed it had secured its future. But no one asked the most dangerous question of all. What happens when you take a child and dress her as a goddess? When you place her inside a palace where every door opens at her command, where senators bow, where her husband fears losing power more than he understands her. When you tell her worth exists only in her body, her womb, her purity, while handing her absolute power and warning her never to use it. What happens when the distance between who she must be in public and what she desires in private becomes a chasm? Rome is about to find out. And if this moment doesn't compel you to stay, to witness what happens when power collides with forbidden desire, then you're missing a lesson our ancestors paid for in blood. What follows isn't just scandal. It's proof that empires don't always collapse on battlefields. Sometimes they rot from bedrooms. Before we go further, if you're drawn to documented histories that classrooms avoid, supporting this channel helps uncover more stories like this. Now, back to Rome. For the first 2 years, everything appears perfect. Messalina gives Claudius a daughter, Claudia Octavia, then a son, Britannicus, named after his father's greatest military triumph. The Senate relaxes. The empire has heirs. At public ceremonies, she plays her role flawlessly. Modest robes, veiled head, eyes lowered, every movement rehearsed to embody the ideal Roman matron. To the world, She is virtue incarnate. But Rome has always split its women into two rigid roles, the matrona and the meretrix, the wife and the courtesan. One guards family honor in the atrium, the other exists in the shadows of the brothel, where men abandon restraint. The system survived because those worlds never overlap. Messalina shattered that boundary. The first whisper surfaced around 42 CE. A senator, delayed in Rome overnight, wanders into the Subura, a maze of narrow streets thick with smoke, wine, and anonymity. He chooses a room, pays the fee. The woman enters wearing a dark wig, heavy coal, cheap perfume masking something unmistakably refined. She turns toward him. He freezes. It's her. Not a rumor. Not a double. The Empress of Rome, according to Tacitus, writing later, biased yet informed by palace insiders. This was no isolated act. Messalina allegedly used the name Lysiska and became a regular at a brothel run by a woman named Scylla. Not from money, not from desperation. For power and thrill. Any man who recognized her became trapped, silent, owned, compromised. And those who didn't became tools in her private rebellion against Roman hypocrisy, because Roman morality was always theater. Senators kept mistresses. Generals visited brothels. Married men slept with slaves without consequence. But elite women were expected to be statues, chaste, silent symbols. Messalina refused the cage. She would return before dawn, discard the wig, wash away the perfume, dress in imperial silk, and attend rituals to Vesta, goddess of chastity. With flawless serenity, the brothel was only the experiment. The palace was the real stage. Imagine the banquets, Rome's elite reclining on silk couches, gold plates piled with delicacies, wine flowing freely. Polite conversation fills the room. Politics, war, grain. Then Messalina signals. Servants withdraw. Doors close. New guests enter. Gladiators fresh from the arena. Actors, foreign captives. Even young aristocrats summoned under false pretenses. What followed? Ancient sources describe with a mix of horror and fascination. Coercion, humiliation. Contests meant to degrade. Senators forced to perform beside rivals. Noble women compelled to submit while their husbands watched, powerless. This wasn't indulgence. It was domination. And Rome was too afraid, or too compromised, to stop it. Refusal was never an option. A tribune declined one of his summons. 3 days later, his body surfaced in the Tiber. A nobleman tried to leave a gathering early. Within a week, his family's estate was confiscated. The message spread quickly through Rome. The Empress did not accept no. Then came the story that refused to die. Pliny the Elder records it almost clinically, a contest between Messalina and a renowned prostitute named Scylla, not for money but for pride. Who could endure more partners in a single night? The number entered history, 25 to 1. Whether exaggerated or sharpened by propaganda, the tale survived because it captured something Romans could not explain, a woman wielding sexual power not as submission, but as domination. Rome had no language for that, so it turned reality into myth. The palace became a theater of power where humiliation was currency. Senators arrived at dawn to beg favors and left at midnight carrying acts they would never confess. Aristocratic families sent their daughters into the empress's chambers and prayed they would return unchanged. Most did. Some did not. No one asked questions in them all. Messalina did not simply hold power. She harvested it, person by person, weaving a web of shared guilt so dense that no one could strike at her without destroying themselves. Every witness became an accomplice. She no longer needed the Senate's loyalty. She possessed their shame, and shame endures longer than allegiance. Through it all, Claudius governed, building aqueducts, reforming courts, conquering Britain. The underestimated administrator Rome depended on. Did he know? Of course he did. The city whispered. Senators murmured. His own freedmen pleaded with him to act. But she was the mother of his heirs. To move against her meant admitting humiliation before the entire empire, risking civil war, confirming every insult ever hurled at his weakness. So he did what powerful men have always done when truth becomes unbearable. He looked away and worked harder, pretending the rot was not spreading until 48 CE, the year everything collapsed. While Claudius was in Ostia safeguarding Rome's grain supply, the work that kept the city alive, Messalina was in Rome doing the unthinkable. She married Gaius Silius, consul designate, young, handsome, and dangerously ambitious. And she did not hide it. This was no secret affair but a public wedding, with witnesses, contracts, and vows, while she was still empress. Tacitus describes the moment with stunned disbelief as Rome's elite watched, frozen, as if the laws themselves had ceased to exist. Was it a coup? A miscalculation? Or had Messalina reached a point where transgression itself was a goal, where the thrill lay not in secrecy, but in daring Rome to stop her? We will never know her thoughts. We only know her actions. And Rome, corrupt, compromised, and afraid, stood paralyzed, watching the line between power and collapse finally disappear. Exhausted Rome finally reached its limit. The first to hear was Narcissus, Claudius' most trusted freedman. He rushed to Ostia and found the emperor bent over grain ledgers, ensuring the city would not starve. Imagine that conversation. How do you tell an emperor that his wife has married another man? How do you convince him when it sounds impossible? But the reports kept coming. Senators confirmed it. Witnesses stepped forward once someone finally dared to ask. And then came the detail that ended all doubt, the marriage contract. Signed, legal, witnessed, undeniable. The laughter died. In that moment stood the man Rome had mocked for decades, the limping scholar, the stammering survivor who lived by being underestimated, publicly and legally humiliated while doing the work that kept the empire alive. What followed was not explosive rage, but something colder, sharper, final. Claudius returned to Rome with the Praetorian Guard at his back. They found her in the gardens of Lucullus, a vast estate on the city's edge, filled with imported trees and endless fountains. The same grounds where she had once ruled senators through fear and desire. Messalina was there with her mother, Lepida. The older woman begged her to run, to act, to do anything. But Messalina seemed frozen. Some sources claim she tried to write a petition for mercy. Others say she simply could not believe it was ending, that after 10 years of bending Rome to her will, Rome had finally bent back. When the soldiers arrived, she recognized them. Men she had seen in the palace, perhaps even summoned to her villa before. Now they had come for her. She fell to her knees. She begged. She pleaded. She offered her children, Octavia and Britannicus, 9 and 7 years old, as hostages, anything to live. The soldiers did not respond. Orders were orders. She reached for a dagger, whose no one knows. Her hand shook. She pressed the blade to her throat and failed. A tribune stepped forward. His name was never recorded, but his act was. He drove the blade into her. Valeria Messalina Augusta, Empress of Rome, died at 25, bleeding into the grass where she had once held the empire's elite captive. Claudius ordered damnatio memoriae, the erasure of her existence. Her statues were dragged through the streets and smashed. Her name was carved out of inscriptions. Records were rewritten as if she had never lived. The message was clear. She never happened, and yet 2,000 years later, here we are, still speaking her name. She did not fall to war or plague, but to the consequences of power without restraint. Rome endures in stone, the Forum, the Colosseum, but the Palatine Hill, where emperors lived and Messalina ruled, lies in ruins. Tourists walk past broken walls. Unaware they stand in the rooms where she once commanded fear itself. Claudius remarried within months, to Agrippina the younger, smarter, colder, more patient. She would later poison him and place her son Nero on the throne, beginning another cycle of madness. Messalina's children met fates nearly as brutal as her own. Octavia was forced to marry Nero, then executed at 22, the same age her mother died. Britannicus was poisoned at 14 during a dinner, collapsing before anyone could help. The Senate pretended Messalina never existed, but the soldiers remembered. The servants remembered. And the families whose daughters entered a villa and returned silent remembered too. History erased her name, but not her shadow. This is a part that refuses to let the story rest. How much of what we think we know about Messalina was truth, and how much was invention? Our sources, Tacitus, Suetonius, Juvenal, were all men, all writing years after her death, all shaped by politics and moral agendas. Roman propaganda followed a familiar script. When a woman threatened male authority, her character was destroyed through accusations of sexual excess. Cleopatra, Livia, Agrippina, Messalina. The pattern is unmistakable. That does not make her innocent, but it does demand caution. Some facts are solid. The marriage to Gaius Silius happened. Even sympathetic sources admit it. Corruption was real. Blackmail existed. Opponents died. But the brothel tales, the contests, the precise numbers, this is where certainty collapses. We cannot know where history ends and caricature begins. What we do know is this. A 15-year-old girl was married to a man in his 50s. She was taught that her worth lay only in her purity and her womb. She was handed immense power without guidance, without purpose, without restraint. And when she found power through transgression, by exploiting Rome's own sexual hypocrisy, the same system that created her destroyed her, then spent 2 millennia calling her a monster. Stand on the Palatine Hill today and you feel it. Not ghosts, but wait. The pressure of stories Rome tried to silence by raising names and smashing stone. Damnatio memoriae never works. You can destroy statues and rewrite records, but lessons survive. Messalina was meant to disappear. Instead, she became immortal, not because Rome wanted her remembered, but because buried truths claw their way back to the surface. Rome fell in many ways, through invasion, plague, and collapse, but it also rotted from within. Messalina's story is not really about sex or scandal. It's about power as a game, about shame as currency, about leaders too compromised to stop decay. Every man she humiliated stayed silent. Every witness became an accomplice, not through loyalty, but fear of exposure. She proved something deeply unsettling. You don't need an army to control people. You only need their secrets. We like to believe we're different now. More evolved, less corrupt, but look closely at any modern empire, any institution of power. How much silence is maintained by shared guilt? How much stability depends on what cannot be revealed? Messalina doesn't haunt ruins. She haunts every place where power and shame share a bed. A century later, Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Look beneath the surface. Let neither the true quality nor the worth of a thing escape you." He was thinking about Rome, about leaders whose polished exteriors hid rot beneath. He could have been warning us. The lesson isn't that Messalina was uniquely evil. The lesson is that Rome created her, married her off as a child, gave her power without purpose, then destroyed her when she exposed their hypocrisy. Her name was erased. Her story survived. And 2,000 years later, we're still asking what it means when those entrusted to preserve virtue become the architects of its collapse.